Sorry I haven't uploaded in a month. I mean, it's not like really anybody's watching, so it doesn't really matter. As you can obviously tell, I'm in a brand new location. That's why I haven't uploaded. I've been in the process of moving. So going through all of that and trying to record these videos is pretty tough. It's also not like people are actually relying on me to upload videos right now. It's really just for myself. So I didn't feel a ton of pressure. Really just put in time getting myself set up, and now here we are. Now we're gonna get back at it. So just wanted to touch on that really quickly. Now let's get into the video. So as you can obviously tell, I'm gonna be going over the top 10 running backs in the 2022 season. At least my rankings right now in the middle of June. So these are obviously gonna change as time goes on and the offseason progresses. Wanted to check in with where I'm standing right now. And I'm gonna be doing this for every single position. So gonna be doing running backs first, and then wide receivers, and then quarterbacks and tight ends. Probably doing the top 20 in 2 separate videos. Also to know, all the stats that I'll be talking about are in half PPR formats, and I primarily play in a single quarterback league. Not that this really matters, but just wanted to note that. So first, I kind of want to mention what I look for in running backs. There's a couple things that stand out right away, such as workload, receiving ability, and great offenses. I might do a video later on in the offseason kind of going over what actually makes an RB1, but those are the key identifiers for me. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on. From there on out, we can look at different things like talent, actual offensive line ability, and other factors that can play into a top end running back. Now, I'm not going to be doing it here, but in my actual rankings, I'm going to be breaking down everyone into different tiers. And I think that's the most valuable way to look at rankings, not looking at, oh, here's 7, here's number 8, here's 9. It's almost impossible for people to try to predict that now. So I'll kind of briefly mention it as I go throughout, but keep in mind, while someone might be ranked 3 or 4 spots different from somebody, they could be still in the same tier, which makes me view them in a very similar light. Now, with that being said, let's get into our first running back. I think the obvious running back one, probably the obvious 101 in everyone's mind, Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, not much to really be said about him. Had 1,800 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns, over 40 receptions, really everything you want. He also had the most red zone attempts out of anyone in the NFL by over 40 attempts. Austin Ekeler was the next closest person to him at 48. The Colts also changed their quarterback from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan, who I think is a definite upgrade. While might not be a significant upgrade, it's definitely an upgrade over Carson Wentz. Over the past 2 seasons, Matt Ryan has had the 4th highest checkdown percentage per PFF. This indicates that he'll probably be checking down even more, giving Jonathan Taylor even more receiving ability, more, I should say, receiving upside. And we've seen what kind of talent Jonathan Taylor is. I mean, he hits every box in that athletic measurables, and then he gets all of the receiving upside, the good offense. They have the 10th ranked offensive line going into 2022 per PFF. So every single possible box that you could imagine is check, check, check. Doesn't have the injury history. He, in my opinion, is in his tier of his own. So there's not much to really say with him. Going to move on to the next one. Already starting at RB2, I could see a ton of different people having different running backs. I'm really focusing on upside personally, especially at the top of these running back positions. I think there's people that go for that are safe, but when I'm picking the 2nd or 3rd pick in the draft, I want someone who can win me my league. And that's why I got Christian McCaffrey at the number 2 position. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be super worried about him since he's barely played over the past 2 years, but anytime he's been on the field, he's been an absolute stud. And I'm one to not really try to predict injuries. People in football just get hurt. It's just how it is, especially someone like Christian McCaffrey who's having high ankle sprains, different shoulder injuries, and they're not these ligament damages like torn ACLs or torn Achilles, anything like that. I'm not going to try to predict someone getting injured. So that's why I have him here, because when he's on the field, he dominates. Over the past 2 years, on games that he's played in over 50% of the snaps, he's averaged 20.8 half PPR fantasy points per game. Listen to this. In those 2 years, he finished as the RB2, the RB6, the RB2, the RB1, the RB3, the RB5, and the RB5. If he's on the field, he is going to be a top 5 RB regardless. If he plays a whole year, no way he doesn't finish as RB3. There's a lot of question marks with his offense and his quarterback, but he's never had a really good offense besides in the very beginning of his career. And his best years were with terrible quarterbacks, so he doesn't need that. If they by chance do make a trade for Jimmy G or Baker Mayfield or something like that, then his upside goes even higher. That's why I got CMC as my number 2 running back. Sticking with the same idea of upside, we can move on to the number 3 running back I got, who is Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry for me personally has kind of fluctuated between the RB3 and the RB6 spot this offseason. I've moved him up recently because I've just got more focused again on this upside. And he also had a foot injury. It wasn't something like a torn ACL like I was talking about, so I'm not too worried about it. He even came back and played in the playoffs last year. Even though he wasn't very good, he was still able to come back after like 10 weeks or so, and he was on pace for over 400 rushing attempts 1,800 yards, 19 touchdowns, and by far his best receiving season to date. Yeah, he was like 40 points ahead of Jonathan Taylor when he got hurt. Like, he was on an absurd pace. They also lost A.J. Brown, which has given them the highest percent of vacated targets of anyone in the NFL. I'm going to be talking about this a decent amount in these videos, specifically because there's a lot of studies that shown that vacated targets tend to actually go to the running backs, not other wide receivers. And because of that, and the fact that Derrick Henry showed his receiving ability last year, I think he could really, get at least 40 plus receptions, which tends to be that mark you need for an RB1, plus his already insane workload on the rushing side. He could easily finish as RB1. Now, there's definitely concern with him being older. He's 28 years old, which is normally like the tail end of elite RBs, but he's had a really weird career where he didn't play in the beginning, and then he had a ton of workload since he has started playing. So it's really hard to predict with him. He's also an anomaly. So I'm going to bank on what we saw last year and what we've seen from him throughout his entire career and predict that he's going to be an absolute stud again. Now, there's also probably people who are worried about him seeing like a higher stack box because they're not going to have AJ, so everyone can focus on him. But the past 2 years, he's led the NFL in stack box percentage and, done what he done last year. He was 7th in the NFL. Then Deontay Foreman ended up leading the league in sack box percentage, and he did really good once he took over for Derrick Henry. So I think the idea of worrying about stacked boxes is not really something you should focus on. Like, he's dominated them his entire life, or entire career, I should say. I think he has that top end upside that you can only get out of a couple people, and we know 100% he is going to get as many touches as he can handle. So I'll bet on the volume, and I'll bet on the talent with him. Now, the last player who I really think has that top end upside is my running back 4, Dalvin Cook. Now, he definitely had a down year last year. He only had 6 touchdowns, which is definitely the anomaly for him. It's interesting because normally touchdowns aren't what you want to bet on with running backs or wide receivers. That is normally not a sticky stat. Dalvin Cook, however, that's kind of what he does. He scores touchdowns. If you watch him, he just makes these NFL athletes look silly. 2019, he had 13 touchdowns. 2020, he had 16 touchdowns. Last year, he only had 6 touchdowns. He's still getting a good amount of receptions. It's really just that touchdown number that needs to come up to get him back to being that top 5 running back that we're used to. And I think it's fair to expect that. We've been hearing him getting more work in the receiving role, so that's going to be super helpful. And there's definitely positive touchdown regression coming for him. I don't want to take credits for the stat because I did not find it. Nick Ercolano of BDGE found it, but I thought it was super telling of kind of what happened with him. So last year, he was tackled 9 times in the 2-yard line. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not going to happen again. I think half of those probably should have gone in. So you add another 4 touchdowns and he's in the double-digit touchdown number. He's back to what he was. And I think that's more likely than not to happen. He's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. He also has a lot of continuity with his offense. Same quarterback, same wide receivers. Sounds like they're just going to get him more involved in the receiving end, and which I think can only help him. So he's the last guy I really see with that running back 1 upside, and I will be taking him at the 104 currently. Now, the 5th running back on my list is someone who I personally love because I had him on multiple teams last year, and he was a stud, and this is Austin Ekeler. He's also someone that's kind of fluctuated for me throughout the offseason. I've had him as high as my running back 2, and now he's down to my running back 5. I don't really see him going much lower than this. He was running back 2 last year, and he also led the league in targets for running backs. They also have the 5th most points for an offense scored last year, so he's attached to a great offense with Justin Herbert. I think my worry really comes due to the touchdown area and the touchdown regression that I think is going to come for him. First off, they drafted Isaiah Spiller, who is a big body goal line back, and they don't really want to use Ekeler in that goal line role, even though he's shown to be really good at it. Last year, he had 12 rushing touchdowns. In the rest of his career combined, which is 4 seasons, he has a total of 9 touchdowns. Now, I think the truth with him probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I don't think he's going to hit double digits rushing touchdowns again this year. He also had 8 receiving touchdowns last year, which he's only done 1 other time. That's something that's a little bit more repeatable, but 8 is still a lot. 20 total touchdowns is not something that you normally see, and trying to assume that's going to happen again is not something I want to bet on. I'm still going to take him top 5. He's still going to be an absolute beast. He's part of a great offense, going to get a ton of work, ton of receiving work, but I think that running back 2 upside is just not quite there. So that's why I kind of dropped him between those other people, because I definitely think he's probably safer than them, but his upside isn't the same. So there'll probably be a tier break in between there. All right, the 6th running back on my list is Joe Mixon. He's also somebody who I have dropped down a little bit because I think he also doesn't have that same upside, but I think he's really, really safe. Last year, he finished third in total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. And one of the biggest strengths for him is that they have an extremely improved offensive line. That's been a really weak point for them for the past 2 years. But they added La'el Collins and Alex Kappa and also a couple other pieces, which La'el Collins is one of the best tackles in the league. It's going to help them out so much. It's going to help out their entire offense so much. And they were already the 7th best offense last year in terms of points per game. I think the issue is really he doesn't get all that receiving work, even though he's pretty good at it. They've just shown over and over and over again they do not want to give him all of that receiving work. You know, Samaje Perine had 30 plus targets last year. Chris Evans was also a part of their team and he got targets, and I think he's going to get more and more. So it just takes away that upside, kind of like Ekeler. There's just some people that are taking away his upside, so he can't reach that top 3 running back in my opinion. But I think he's going to be super safe. He's going to get most of the rushes. They're going to be part of a great offense. He's definitely going to get most of the goal line work. And it's not like he gets no receivings. You know, he had 40 plus receptions last year. So I think he's going to be a stud. I love him. I love his talent. I love his offense. I just wish they would give him the receiving work, you know. And I've heard for years everyone saying, you know, he can do it. He can handle it. But if the team doesn't want to give it to him, then it doesn't matter what the hell we think. We don't know what we're talking about compared to them. So I'm going to go with what they've shown us, that they don't want to give him that work. Yeah, moving on to running back 7, I have Najee Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, I've also seen some people have him as high as like the running back 3, running back 4, and I don't know. I cannot get behind it. He was first in the league for receptions for a running back and tied for first in targets for running back, so he's going to get that work again, but he's not going to have Big Ben throwing him the ball. I mean, Big Ben was a little statue. He could not move. He's going to have either Mitchell Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, who are much more mobile than Big Ben. He will definitely still be high up in the receptions and targets for running backs, but I don't think he's going to be first for both of them. They're going to be moving at least a little bit more than him. They've also added more weapons with George Pickens and Calvin Austin, so that'll be spread around a lot more. He was also 3.9 yards carry last year, which is pretty terrible, and he also saw the 10th lowest percentage of stacked boxes for any running back. So if you're not seeing stacked boxes and you're running that inefficiently, that really worries me. PFF also has their offensive line ranked 30th going into the year. So there's a lot of signs for me personally pointing to him struggling. And the fact that I'm saying he's going to struggle and I'm still putting him at the 7th running backs, I think that shows how talented he is. But I just can't get behind the top end running back. I don't think he has the ability to finish up there this year. But I do think he's going to be super safe. He's going to get the workload. And that's, like I said, one of the most important things. He's going to get the workload and he's going to get the receiving work, which are 2 of the most important things. So there's definitely a lot of safety here. I just don't think he has the upside. Okay, number 8, I got Lenny Fournette, playoff Lenny. This dude, I mean, what a comeback. Pretty cool. Everyone kind of thought he was dead in the water when he first got to Tampa. And I think this is going to be Brady's last year, so they're just going all in with him and with everyone, really. He was 7th in total fantasy points and 6th in fantasy points per game last year. He was also 3rd in receptions and targets for running backs. You know, Tom Brady loves those dump-off passes, and I don't really see that changing much this next year. Bucks were also 2nd in offensive points last year, so attached to a great offense with Tom Brady, who isn't running he's not moving, so he's going to be able to dump it off to Lenny, who is shown to be great with receiving lately. Their offensive line was also 2nd per PFF last year, and it's 4th per PFF going into the year this year, so great offensive line, great offense, gets the receiving work, has really shown, nothing to slow him down. I think the only reason I don't have him higher is that they drafted Rachaad White, who is really talented and has great receiving ability. So I'm afraid that he might end up taking some of that away, but he's a pretty raw prospect and definitely needs some work. And Brady, if he doesn't trust you, you're not going to play. So if he doesn't earn Brady trust right away, then they'll probably just keep going to Lenny. And I think Lenny's going to ball out again this year because they're going for it all. So get him if you can. I think he's being drafted a lot lower than this. So I'm really high on him this year. I think he's going to be a stud. All right, number 9, we got Alvin Kamara, who, man, I don't really know what to make of him. He had a weird year last year. He played in his least amount of games, but he had his highest amount of rushing attempts by over 50. But then he had his least targets and receptions by about 40. So it just kind of complete role reverse from what we're used to seeing from him. And I don't really think it's because of him. I think he's still Alvin Kamara. I think he'll do what he does. I think his outcome is really dependent on what his team can do. They're going to have Michael Thomas back, hopefully. They drafted Chris Olave, and hopefully Jameis is healthy all year. So if they have all of that and they're able to figure it out, I think he could finish a lot higher than this, but there's so many unknowns that like I just have no idea what to really do with him or what I think the Saints are going to be like. So that's why I have him ranked down here. I think there's some question marks. So I have him made below people like Lenny and Najee, who I think there's a lot more certainty around them. But yeah, this could definitely change depending on what happens in the offseason and what we hear. All right, last up in this video, we got DAndre Swift. You know, somebody who I actually very similar to Alvin Kamara, you know, gets the receiving work, probably not going to play in all the games, super efficient with his touches. He's just on a worse offense and will probably miss a couple more games, but I've kind of been flipping them back and forth. He was actually 4th in the league last year in receptions and targets for running backs, and PFF actually has their offensive line ranked 3rd going into 2020, so that could really help him out a lot and help him hopefully stay healthy. There's a lot of people that I've kind of been hearing saying that he could finish, you know, like that Austin Ekeler last year, you know, shoot all the way up, but I think that's pretty silly. I think we could kind of see last year how good the Chargers offense were going to be, and I don't think the Lions will make anywhere near that step this year. But if that does happen, then obviously he could finish way higher, but I just don't see that happening. I think it's kind of foolish to think that. He's one of those people that you watch and you're just blown away every single time he touches the ball. You think he could score literally every single time he touches the ball. It is unbelievable. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. Lions just need to figure it out. He could be an easy top 5 running back. He has a talent for it, but talent get your ass fired. All right, anyways, that was my top 10 running backs early on. Sorry I haven't uploaded in a while. Hopefully I can get back in the routine of doing this. Look for more videos like this. Going to be doing the top 20 running backs and then it's going on to the wide receivers. A little rusty since I haven't spoken in front of a camera in a month, but it is what it is. All right. Thank y'all for tuning in. Peace.